Dr. Park stepped off the transport ship onto the smooth marble platform of the Galactic Xenological Research Academy. She took a deep breath of the artificially perfumed air and straightened her uniform. The Academy's 3 silver moons hung in the pink sky above the tall crystal towers. This was the moment she had worked for her entire career. A small group of alien faculty members waited at a safe distance. Dr. Park noticed their nervous postures. This reaction wasn't surprising. Humans from Earth were classified as Class 12, Deathworlders in galactic society, beings who evolved on planets so harsh and dangerous that most galactic citizens couldn't even visit without special equipment. "Welcome to Harmony, Dr. Park," said Director Kang. His translucent body glowed a polite shade of blue as he bowed but did not approach closer. "Your journey from Earth must have been tiring." "Not at all," Park replied, taking careful steps toward the group. Several faculty members shifted backward subtly. "I'm eager to begin my work here." Professor Song, a tall being with 6 arms and shimmering scales, studied Park through compound eyes. "And what exactly will your specialty be at our academy?" Her voice carried a note of suspicion. Park smiled. "I'm a xenobiologist specializing in apex predator behavior." She pulled out a small data tablet and projected an image of a massive 6-limbed creature with chameleonic skin. "I propose to study the Shadowstalker on Tenebrous Moon." The reaction was immediate. Professor Song's scales flattened in alarm. Director Kang's body turned a pale yellow. 2 smaller faculty members actually moved behind a column. "The Shadowstalker?" Professor Song's voice rose. "Those creatures have killed every researcher who approached them. Even our remote drones rarely survive contact." Park nodded calmly. "Which is why we know so little about them. I believe my experience with Earth's apex predators gives me unique insights." Director Kang floated closer, his curiosity apparently overcoming his caution. "What exactly do you propose, Dr. Park?" "Direct contact study. I will establish a relationship with a Shadowstalker specimen." The silence that followed was broken by nervous laughter from Professor June, a small, furry being with large eyes. "You mean to say you wish to befriend one of the deadliest predators known to galactic science?" "Not exactly befriend," Park corrected. "Establish mutual recognition and non-aggression. I've done similar work with Earth's large predators." Professor Song's scales now rippled with a mix of colors that Park's translator indicated meant disbelief mixed with concern for mental stability. "Impossible," Song stated firmly. "The risk assessment alone would never pass our safety council." The Academy's annual research competition was announced on the main screens around them. Teams would compete for funding and prestige with groundbreaking xenobiological studies. Park pointed to the announcement. "I wish to enter this competition with my Shadowstalker proposal." Director Kang's body shifted through several colors before settling on a deep blue. "Dr. Park, while we welcome Earth's first representative to our faculty, this proposal is concerning. Suicidal is the word," muttered Professor June. Park stood her ground. "Humans have coexisted with apex predators throughout our evolutionary history. It's given us unique insights that species from safer worlds might not possess." The implied criticism wasn't lost on the gathered faculty. Several showed signs of offense. "Are you suggesting your Deathworld origins make you superior at research?" Professor Song's scales now displayed a pattern Park's translator didn't recognize. "Not superior," Park replied calmly. "Just differently equipped for this specific challenge." Tall, silent figure at the back of the group finally spoke. Professor Min had been watching the exchange with enormous black eyes that reflected the room like mirrors. "I have studied the human species," Min said in a low, musical voice. "Their planet forces adaptation to constant threat. Perhaps this perspective has value." Director Kang seemed to consider this. "The rules of the competition do allow for high-risk studies, provided proper observation protocols are followed." Park seized the opportunity. "I accept any safety measures you deem necessary, including observer personnel." After a tense discussion among the faculty in their native languages, Director Kang's body settled into a formal purple hue. Very well, Dr. Park. Your proposal is provisionally accepted on one condition. 3 faculty members must accompany you as observers. Professor Song immediately stepped forward. I volunteer. Someone must document this experiment. Professor Min nodded, silently, also volunteering. To everyone's surprise, Professor June raised a small paw. I will go as well. My specialty in behavioral patterns may prove useful. Park smiled at her new team, hiding her satisfaction. She needed their expertise as much as they needed to prove her wrong. We leave for Tenebris in 3 days, she said. I suggest you all read my preliminary research on Shadowstalker territorial behaviors. As the faculty dispersed, Park looked out at the perfectly maintained gardens of the academy. Soon she would trade this safety for the dangerous wilds of Tenebris, and she couldn't wait. The research ship broke through Tenebris's thick cloud cover, shaking violently as lightning struck its shields. Dr. Park sat calmly at the window, watching the dark landscape appear below. Behind her, the 3 alien professors clutched their safety harnesses. Landing on this moon during storm season seems unwise. Professor Song's scales flickered with anxiety patterns. Perhaps we should orbit until conditions improve. The storms never improve, Park replied without turning from the window. They're a constant feature of Tenebris. It's why the Shadowstalkers evolved such remarkable adaptations. Professor Min's large black eyes reflected the lightning flashes. Fascinating. Perpetual electrical storms would explain their unique energy-sensing organs. Professor June, the smallest of the observers, wrapped his furry arms around himself. Fascinating from orbit, terrifying up close. The ship landed with a heavy thud on rocky ground. Outside, purple-tinged rain fell sideways in the howling wind. Massive trees bent under the force of the gale, their thick trunks covered in bioluminescent moss that gave the landscape an eerie glow. Home sweet home for the next 3 months, Park said, standing and gathering her equipment. You seem almost happy, observed Professor Song. Park smiled. This reminds me of Earth's typhoon season. My first predator studies were during similar conditions. The alien professors exchanged concerned glances as they followed Park down the ramp and into a prefabricated shelter that had been dropped ahead of their arrival. Once inside, they watched as Park methodically organized her equipment. Our first priority is establishing a perimeter, she explained, handing out small devices to each professor. These sensors will alert us to any large lifeforms approaching. Camp. Professor June examined the device with narrow eyes. And what exactly will we do when a Shadowstalker approaches? The records indicate they can disable standard defense systems. We observe. Park replied simply. That's why we're here. Over the next 3 days, the team set up observation posts around their camp. The alien professors marveled at how easily Park moved through the dangerous terrain, seemingly unconcerned by the poisonous plants and treacherous ground that had them constantly checking their hazard meters. On the 4th night, the first alarm sounded. All 4 researchers gathered at the main shelter's monitoring station. The sensor showed a large heat signature moving along the perimeter. It's a Shadowstalker, whispered Professor Min, her voice tinged with genuine fear. Approximately 300 kilograms by the reading. They watched as the creature paused near their eastern sensor. Its body shifted colors to match the bioluminescent landscape, making it nearly invisible except on thermal imaging. It's testing our defenses, Professor Song said, her scales flattening against her body. This is how the attack on the last research team began. Park shook her head. It's curious, not hunting. See how it's moving? That's investigative behavior, not predatory stalking. Professor June looked skeptical. How can you possibly know the difference? Earth's apex predators show similar patterns, Park explained, pointing to the creature's movement path. Hunters move differently than explorers. The professors watched in silence as Park took food from their supplies and walked toward the shelter door. What are you doing? Professor Song's scales now flashed alarm patterns. Establishing first contact, Park said calmly. Our scent is new to this territory. The Shadowstalker needs to categorize us. As food or not food, you mean? Professor June muttered. Park nodded. Exactly. The three professors watched in horror as Park stepped outside the shelter, moved 20 meters from the entrance and placed the food package on a flat rock. She then retreated to the shelter without turning her back on the distant heat signature. You're feeding it? Professor Min asked, her large eyes wider than usual. Won't that teach it to associate our camp with food? No, Park explained as she sealed the shelter door. I'm placing the food far enough away that it establishes a boundary. The Shadow Stalker will learn that our camp and our scents exist, but we're not prey or threats. They watched the monitors as hours passed. Finally, the Shadow Stalker approached the food, its massive form suddenly visible in the bioluminescent light. 6 powerful limbs moved with surprising grace as it sniffed the offering. Then, looking directly toward their shelter, with eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness, it took the food and disappeared into the forest. It knew exactly where we were watching from, Professor Song whispered. Park nodded, a small smile on her face. First contact established. Tomorrow, we begin observation post-rotations. Professor June looked at her with new respect, mixed with concern. You really intend to get closer to that creature? Step by step, Park replied. This is just the beginning of the approach. 2 weeks passed with the same routine. Each night, Dr. Park left food at carefully measured distances from the camp, each placement slightly closer than the last. The Shadow Stalker always came after everyone had retreated to the shelter. The alien professors watched with growing fascination as the creature's behavior changed subtly. It's coming earlier each night, Professor Min noted, her dark eyes fixed on the monitor. And it spends more time in the clearing before taking the food. Professor Song's scales showed a pattern of scientific interest, her initial fear now mixed with curiosity. It also seems less concerned with camouflage. Notice how its skin remains in the same pattern rather than constantly shifting. It's growing comfortable with our presence, Park explained. She checked her equipment one final time before pulling on her protective gear. Tonight we move to the next phase. Professor June jumped up from his observation station. What next? Phase? The protocol states clear observation boundaries. Park secured her breathing mask and checked her vital monitors. I'm going to observe from the blind we set up near the feeding site. All 3 professors began objecting at once. Their voices mingled in a chorus of concern and disbelief. The blind is barely 50 meters from where it feeds. Direct proximity. Observation violates safety protocols. No researcher has ever survived close contact. Park waited for them to finish. I'll maintain safe distance and have full safety equipment. The wind direction will keep my scent away from the feeding area. She looked at each of them. This is why we came. To observe, to learn, to understand. After more debate, Professor Min finally nodded. Your species evolved alongside predators. Perhaps your instincts are better calibrated for this work than ours. Park slipped out of the shelter 3 hours before the Shadow Stalker's usual appearance. She moved silently through the dark forest, her path illuminated only by the faint glow of the bioluminescent plants. When she reached the observation blind, a small camouflaged structure built into a rock formation, she settled in to wait. Back at the shelter, the 3 professors watched her vital signs on their monitors. Her heart rate is remarkably steady, Professor Song observed. My cardiovascular system would be in complete distress. Almost exactly on schedule, the Shadow Stalker emerged from the forest. In the low light of the bioluminescence, Park got her first clear view of the creature. It moved on 6 powerful limbs, its body covered in scales that shifted subtly to match the surrounding environment. Its head featured sensory organs unlike anything in Earth's evolutionary history. Part eye, part heat sensor, part electrical field detector. Park remained perfectly still as the creature approached the food she had left earlier. Through her camera feed, the professors could see it clearly for the first time as well. Magnificent, whispered Professor Min. Look at the neural ridge along its spine. Those are far more developed than our scans suggested. The Shadow Stalker suddenly froze. It lifted its head and turned directly toward Park's hiding place. For a heart-stopping moment, it stared at the exact spot where she was concealed. It knows she's there. Professor June's voice shook. It can sense her somehow. In the shelter, all three professors held their breath. In the blind, Park remained, motionless, her heart rate increasing only slightly according to the monitors. The shadow stalker took the food but didn't leave. Instead, it carried its meal closer to Park's position and settled down to eat, never taking its sensory organs off her hiding place. It's studying her while it eats, Professor Song said in amazement. This is unprecedented behavior. After finishing its meal, the creature did something truly shocking. It approached the blind, stopping just 10 meters away. Then it placed something on the ground, a small object that glinted in the bioluminescent light. Is that? Professor June leaned closer to the screen. A tool, Professor Min finished, her voice barely audible. It's offering a tool. Inside the blind, Park carefully activated her communication device. It's a crystalline growth, possibly used for hunting. This confirms the intelligence level we suspected. The shadow stalker waited as if expecting a response. After several minutes of silent standoff, Park made a decision. She slowly, deliberately moved into view, remaining in a non-threatening posture. The professors gasped collectively as they watched their human colleague expose herself to the most dangerous predator on Tenebris. The shadow stalker's body rippled with color changes, blue, green, purple patterns that flowed across its scales. It made no aggressive move. Instead, it watched Park with what could only be described as intense curiosity. I'm establishing visual contact, Park said softly into her communicator. No threatening posture. I'm going to try something. Very slowly, she reached into her pocket and removed a small light, a simple tool of her own. She placed it on the ground between them. The shadow stalker studied the offering. Then, with astonishing gentleness for a creature of its size, it extended a limb and touched the light, which activated under its touch. The creature jerked back, then leaned forward with obvious interest. It looked from the light to Park and back again. First real contact established, Park said, her voice steady despite the momentous occasion. I'm calling this specimen Jin. The morning light filtered through Tenebris's constant cloud cover as Dr. Park sat on a large rock at the edge of the camp perimeter. She had been in the same position for 3 hours, motionless except for her breathing. 20 meters away, Jin the shadow stalker lay in similar stillness, his massive body partially camouflaged against the rocky ground. This is the 5th day they've done this, Professor June whispered from the observation post. Just sitting and staring at each other. Professor Min adjusted her viewing scope. Not staring, communicating. Watch the shadow stalker's scale patterns. Indeed, subtle waves of color rippled across Jin's body in what appeared to be non-random sequences. Park would occasionally move her hand in a deliberate gesture, and Jin would respond with a new pattern of colors. She's developing a rudimentary communication system, Professor Song said, her own scales showing patterns of amazement. In just 3 weeks. The door to the observation post slid open as Park finally returned. Her face showed signs of exhaustion, but also excitement. Jin is ready for the next step, she announced. Today I'll approach to direct contact range. All 3 professors began protesting at once. Absolutely not. We've already gone far beyond protocol. Direct contact is suicide. Park held up her hand for silence. Jin has been showing submission signals for the past 2 days. In predator species, this indicates acceptance into social structure. You believe the creature sees you as part of its social group? Professor Song asked skeptically. Not exactly, Park explained. More like a non-threat entity with whom cooperation might be beneficial. Jin has been leaving small prey at the boundary line. That's a significant offering in predator communication. Professor Min's large eyes blinked slowly. You've achieved more in 3 weeks than all previous Shadowstalker research combined. Why risk everything now? Because understanding requires proximity, Park said simply. I need your help, all of you. To everyone's surprise, the professors agreed to assist. They set up additional monitoring equipment and emergency response protocols. By midday, Park stood at the edge of the clearing where Jin had been appearing regularly. Vital signs stable, Professor Song reported through the communication system. Jin is approaching from the northeast. Park remained still as the massive predator emerged from the forest. The Shadowstalker moved with cautious grace, its 6 limbs barely making a sound on the rocky ground. It stopped 10 meters away, its sensory ridge fully extended. "I'm going to move forward now," Park said quietly. "Jin will either retreat or hold position." The 3 professors watched anxiously as their human colleague took slow, deliberate steps toward the most dangerous predator on Tenebris. Jin's scales rippled with patterns they'd never seen in the research records. 5 meters, 3 meters, 2 meters. Park stopped and extended her hand, palm down, a gesture she had been practicing with Jin from a distance. The Shadowstalker's head tilted, its sensory organs focusing intently on her hand. With a gracefulness that belied its massive size, Jin extended one limb. The movement was slow, controlled, and precise. The tip of the limb, with its retracted claws, gently touched Park's outstretched hand. "Contact established," Park whispered, her voice steady despite the historical moment. No aggressive response. Professor Min's voice came through the communicator, filled with wonder. "This defies everything we know about Shadowstalker behavior. Over." The next week, Park and Jin's interactions grew longer and more complex. The professors began joining Park in the field at a safe distance, documenting the unprecedented relationship forming between human and predator. "Look how Jin responds to her voice patterns," Professor June noted as they observed from 50 meters away. "There's genuine recognition there." Professor Song nodded, her scales showing a pattern of scientific excitement. "And Park can distinguish Jin's vocalizations now. Yesterday she identified 3 distinct calls. Their research was progressing faster than anyone had anticipated, when suddenly their sensors detected an unauthorized ship entering Tenebris's atmosphere. "Poachers," Professor Min said grimly as she checked the signature. "They hunt Shadowstalkers for their neural tissues, highly valuable on the black market." Park immediately headed for Jin's territory to warn him, despite her colleagues' protests. She found the Shadowstalker at their usual meeting place, agitated and alert to the disturbance. "We need to move Jin to the protected valley," Park told the others via communicator. "The poachers won't follow into the deeper territory." As the team worked to guide Jin away from danger, the poacher's ship landed nearby. Armed figures emerged, scanning for Shadowstalker signs. In the confusion that followed, Professor Song became separated from the group. She found herself cornered against a rock face with 2 poachers approaching, their neural disruptors ready. A terrifying roar split the air. Jin appeared on the ridge above, his scales blazing with threat patterns the researchers had never seen. Bright reds and yellows that seemed to pulse with electricity. The poachers raised their weapons, but Jin moved with impossible speed. He positioned himself between Professor Song and the hunters, his massive body forming a living shield. "He's protecting her," Professor Min whispered in disbelief. "A Shadowstalker is protecting an alien being." The bond they had witnessed between Park and Jin had extended to them all. The grand presentation hall of the Galactic Xenological Research Academy buzzed with excited conversation. Hundreds of researchers from across the galaxy had gathered for the annual competition results. At the center of attention stood Dr. Park and her 3 alien colleagues, along with a large holographic projector. Director Kang floated onto the stage, his translucent body glowing with formal blue patterns. "Today we witness the conclusion of the most controversial research project in Academy history. Team Tenebris will present their findings on the Shadowstalker species." Professor Song stepped forward, her scales displaying professional confidence, a dramatic change from her initial skepticism 3 months earlier. "Esteemed colleagues, what you are about to see challenges everything we thought we knew about apex predator species, interspecies communication, and perhaps our fundamental understanding of intelligence itself." The lights dimmed as Professor Min activated the holographic display. A life-sized image of Jin appeared, so realistic that several audience members gasped and moved back in their seats. Subject Jin, adult male shadow stalker, Professor Min explained. Previously classified as a Category 1 threat species with no potential for non-lethal interaction. The hologram shifted to show footage of Park and Jin sitting together on a rocky outcrop, the human woman calmly taking notes while the massive predator rested beside her. Murmurs of disbelief spread through the audience. A senior researcher stood up. This must be artificially generated footage. No living being has ever approached a shadow stalker at this proximity and survived. The footage is authentic, Professor Jun replied, his small form standing proudly beside his taller colleagues. We have complete neurological and biological data to verify all recordings. The presentation continued, showing Jin's growing interactions with the research team. The audience watched in stunned silence as the hologram displayed the poacher incident, showing Jin positioning himself between Professor Song and danger. The subject exhibited protective behavior toward a being completely outside its evolutionary experience, Professor Song explained, her scales rippling with remembered emotion. This suggests cognitive processes far beyond instinctual response. Andy, older academic with crystalline features, made a dismissive gesture. One anomalous specimen hardly constitutes a paradigm shift. Perhaps this shadow stalker is simply defective in its natural aggressive instincts. Park stepped forward for the first time. The room grew quiet as the human researcher addressed the challenge. Jin is not defective, she said calmly. In fact, he is exceptionally intelligent even for his species. We believe shadow stalkers have been misunderstood because our observation methods triggered their defensive responses. She nodded to Professor Min, who activated the next hologram sequence. This one showed Jin leading Park to a hidden valley deep in Tenebrous' forests. There, to the audience's astonishment, were 5 more shadow stalkers of various sizes. Jin introduced us to his family group, Park explained. After the poacher incident, he brought us to his secure territory, something no outside species has ever been permitted to witness. The hologram showed younger shadow stalkers approaching the researchers with curiosity, rather than aggression. One small juvenile even mimicked Park's hand gestures in what appeared to be attempted communication. We discovered shadow stalkers live, in complex family units, Professor Jun added. They teach their young through demonstration and have rudimentary tool use capabilities. The most dramatic moment came when the hologram displayed Park and Jin engaged in what was unmistakably a communication session. Park made a series of hand and body movements, and Jin responded with precise color patterns across his scales. They repeated these exchanges with slight variations. We've documented over 40 unique signaling combinations, Professor Song said. This constitutes a basic language system that Jin has taught to his family group and that they now use to communicate with us. The audience erupted in excited discussion. Director Kang had to flash his body brightly several times to restore order. If what you're showing us is verified, said a senior xenobiologist, it completely changes our understanding of predator species development. The implications for interspecies communication are enormous. Professor Min nodded. We believe many so-called deadly species may simply be responding to our approach methods. Beings from non-predatory evolutionary backgrounds like most of us lack the instinctual understanding to approach apex predators correctly. Park stepped forward again. My background as a human from Earth, a death world with numerous apex predators, gave me perspectives that helped bridge this gap. Perhaps this suggests a new collaborative approach to xenobiology, combining the strengths of different evolutionary histories. The final hologram showed something that left even the most skeptical researchers speechless. Jin and 2 juvenile shadow stalkers deliberately demonstrating hunting techniques for the research team, then waiting as Professor Jun recorded the behavior before continuing. They understand the concept of teaching across species boundaries, Park explained. They recognize our research purpose and are actively participating in it. When the lights came up, Director Kang floated forward, his body now glowing with the bright purple of profound realization. In all my cycles of academia, he said, I have never witnessed such a fundamental challenge to our established knowledge. He turned to the research team. The Academy hereby approves permanent funding for the Shadowstalker Communication Initiative, with Dr. Park as lead researcher. As applause filled the hall, Park exchanged glances with her alien colleagues. What had begun as a controversial experiment had become something more, a bridge between worlds that had never before connected.